Well, good morning. This is Elaine Glover from Kingdom Connect, and today is the 7th of October, and we like to remember um, what happened. Is it 2 years ago? Wow, that's gone by so fast. Well, I remember waking up, I think it was Saturday morning, or I can't remember when it was, Saturday morning, and hearing that Hamas had invaded Israel. And it seemed bizarre to me, to be honest, watching it because it looked like James Bond. People arriving on drones or up from the air, on land and sea. And that in itself sparked a bit of wonder what on earth was going on because I know, having been to Gaza, no, not necessarily Gaza, I think I went to Ramallah, but having been into what they call Palestine, um, and I saw that they were very third world. That their hotels and bakeries and streets. Because in 2012, I did go to Ramallah with a Palestinian on a trip. And even then, I was a bit worried that I was going to get kidnapped. There's always that fear, isn't there, of Hamas or Hezbollah, because I'd never really been there before. And he took me round and we went and had some bread and it was delicious and they were so nice. One thing I found about the Palestinians in ordinary times, if there are any, but I wasn't their enemy and they weren't mine, but they were so kind in Ramallah. He went round all over the place. But that's what I noticed, that it was quite third world. So I couldn't kind of imagine this James Bond, the way that they entered Israel. It seemed bizarre to me. But then, as the days progressed, because it doesn't always hit you, and when I saw from Hamas webcams what they were doing and what they were saying, I was sickened. And I really hated, um, what do they say? I've forgotten even what they say. But I really hated that language and the aggression that they had, and I began to hear that they'd gone into kibbutz because they'd sent Gazans to work for them, and from that, they gained a lot of logistics of how to get in there, their homes, where they were. That's it, Allah Akbar. When everybody says Allah Akbar, I actually hated that at the time. I hate Allah Akbar because of what it represented. They use their own people to go and look after or clean their homes or garden or do what they do to get the logistics. But when I heard what Hamas had done, it was like worse than a horror story. I know that ISIS, um, my friend is Canon Andrew White, the vicar of Baghdad, is my best friend, or one of them. And he was saying that somebody had rang him and ISIS had gone into their home, and if he hadn't, if he didn't deny his faith, then he would be killed. And with his children there, he didn't know what to do, so he denied his faith and instantly felt so much regret. But the following day, they came back to that man's house again, and they took the children and cut them in half, whether it's long ways or straight through. They murdered these children. And I believe in the Bible that they are the martyrs. Children, so many children were murdered by ISIS. And I never thought you'd see it again, but this was worse. Hamas went into the house shooting. They shot one teenage girl in front of the family. They chopped off babies' heads. They put all the bodies outside and all the heads all the way round on shelves and on lamps in the house. The things that really astounded me was they smashed babies' heads on walls, they burnt them alive. And a pregnant woman, they slit open her belly took the baby out and murdered the baby and the mother in front of her children. And it's sickening. I- it's just evil. It's demonic and evil. And I know that they had to take drugs. They had to take some form of drug so that they could do that. But one of them was ringing up their mother saying, "Oh, I've killed these. I'm going to have 12 virgins. Oh, I've killed these people." And I'm thinking, if that was my son that rang me up, I'd not only be horrifically ashamed, I'd be desperately shocked to think that my own son had murdered, not just killed them or shot them, but they even raped women until they were dead. And when they were dead, their pelvis was broken because they were raping dead women. How sickening. And, the whole thing, that at the supernova, they got hold of girls, as I say, and gang raped them until their bones are broken inside. And I don't know, they were shoving bottles inside them, uh, metal objects, awful. And they chopped off men's penises and put them in their mouths. They also, with the dead bodies, got a male penis and put it on the woman and chopped off the breasts and put it on the men. This was absolutely so barbaric for me. I mean, some people don't believe it happened, but I really do. And they burnt families together. They tied them up, poured petrol on them, and set them alight while they were eating and enjoying themselves. I mean, how demonic is that? It was absolutely awful. And I was so shocked to the core. I can't explain how I felt. It was terrible. That if people hated some people so much that they could do that to other people. I mean, these people were in bed, and it was the last day of Tabernacles, was it Simhat Torah? So they not only did this on Shabbat, but they did this on the last day of their festival. And oh, as a Christian, what do you do? I mean, I've always believed that we need to forgive, because if Jesus can forgive us, how much more we need to forgive other people. So I'm just rubbing the script. I don't know what it's doing. That's better. But I really, in my heart, couldn't resignate what was going on. And all the time, Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar. How could anybody think that is great? It was terrible. I can't express. And you hear, I mean, I have been to Magon David Adom. When we went in, I think it was in May we went, this May. And we went to Magon David Adom head office, and they were telling us about it. And we heard some part of a phone call. One was a very young man. I was a teenager, but I'm 64 nearly, so he was a very young man to me. And he was saying, "Dad, Father, I love you. I want you to know I love you. And tell Mum I love you. I love you so much." And the father couldn't sort of get to understand what he was actually talking about, because, it's quite early in the morning. I mean, I don't know how. And the father were on a Teams meeting with this man, verbally audible Teams meeting with this young man, the father, and Magon David Adam. And the father just couldn't understand why was he saying, and you do hear your children say, "I love my mum and dad." But to hear somebody say, "Dad, never forget I love you. Tell mum that I love her," you'd be thinking, what's happening? And the next thing you heard is, and then silence. And then the father realized, it made me cry. And then there was a little boy about 6 whose mum and dad were murdered in their home. So he was hiding in somewhere with his little sister, and the other one apparently had been captured by Hamas. I'm not sure if she'd been raped, but she was one of the early hostages to be released. But this little boy and this little girl were hiding for 10 or 11, 12, 13 hours or more, waiting for the IDF, waiting for their uncle, waiting for somebody to help them. And he was on the phone and he was very calm. I thought, you poor little boy is being the big daddy or the big father to this little girl, and their mother and father are being killed. And all these things, I just couldn't resonate at all. Why? What was going on? Why? People say, oh, well, the Israelis, they were in there telling them, but the Israelis apparently left. I think it was 2005 when they left. And, or was it, I don't remember if it's, I think it was 2005 or 2015, but I'm sure it's 2005. And the Gazans had voted in Hamas. Well, obviously, they hadn't got any choice. But they were not being run by the IDF. They didn't want anything to do with them. And the reason why they put the wall up was because they were fed up with people going to Israel and Jerusalem and Tel Aviv and on buses and having and being a suicide bomber. And they killed not only just the Jewish people, but their own people and tourists as well. And it was terrible. I cannot get over the evil of that day and after that. And another thing which really got into my depths of my soul was Lucky. Is it somebody Lucky? I can't remember names, some terrible. Shawnee Look or something like that. This poor, beautiful young girl, she'd been to the dance, the supernova, and like a lot of them were hardly wearing any clothes, but that's what young people do. I think I remember years ago, not like that, but you've not got as many clothes on as you should when you go out dancing or to a pub or to a club or something. They were dancing and celebrating the end of their festival, but then all of a sudden, from nowhere, these thousands of Hamas turned up, shooting, raping, killing, and then they took some hostage. And then after, yeah, but sorry, I was talking about Sonia Hawk. And I saw her on this truck, and I don't know whether she was dead or almost dead, and they were abusing her body and spitting at her, and it was just open, and a leg hanging off the back of the truck. How could a son ring up the mother and say, oh, I've killed blah, 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 I haven't 12 virgins? If my son did that, I would be so absolutely ashamed of him. I mean, obviously, you've got to forgive people. But at that particular point, they're demons, they're demonic. It's not normal. It's not a normal thing to do. Ring your mother up and say with glee, I've murdered all these people, chopped the head off the babies, banged them on the wall, split open a pregnant woman. I mean, what's wrong with them? What is wrong with them? It's just demonic. And the thing is, when you look at me, and I do Bible research, and years ago, thousands of years ago, I mean, clans used to do this. I mean, it's not it's unnatural to me, but in biblical times, these things did happen. But today, you'd have thought, the people have got a bit more aware of what's right or wrong. But one of the things that somebody said was, it's a sacrifice to Satan with the blood being shed and an offering through these people being set alight. It's demonic, it's witchcraft, it's evil, it's Satan. Satan comes to rob, kill, and destroy everything. But then I can't get over Christians. I can't get over Christians or people who say they are really born again, but are they? Somebody that I know who led me to Christ is very pro-Palestinian. I don't know what happened to him. Was he always like that? I don't know. But the person or one of the people, I was led to the Lord in the first instance by my neighbour, somebody in the youth group in Salvation Army, and also through the testimony of the major of that particular corps. And he's very pro-Palestinian, the person who, one of the people led me to Christ. I don't understand it. I don't understand Christians because, first of all, it says in the Bible, in Genesis, and he said to Abraham, those people who curse you, curse my land, curse my people. If they curse, they will be cursed. If they bless, they will be blessed. So for a start off, when you're very anti-Israel, you're putting a curse on yourself. And also its people. You are, because that's in the Bible, and I do believe the word of God is true. And also, one of the things that I've learned, BBC is so full of propaganda. It's unbelievable. I mean, we have, since Queen Elizabeth died, and she had reigned for many years, all we have in the media is William hates Harry, William hates Meghan, William hates Camilla, William hates this, and William hates that. Who doesn't he hate? He seems to be a big chip on his shoulder. And then we have our king who's become a Muslim, and he's always been that way, to be honest. And I heard in the media that William doesn't want to have the C of E, doesn't want to be bothered with the church. What a fool. Do you know one of the things which I've found, and I'm probably going off the plot here, but one of the things that I've found is that when we went to Swindon this last weekend, I saw British flags everywhere, painted on walls, painted on houses, painted everywhere. And when I preached the gospel, there was these men, and they were, they were so pleased I was preaching the gospel. Even if they may not have had the faith, they were pleased because I'm a Christian and this country's supposed to be Christian. So we've got all this media floating about the royal family and Andrew and all this stuff that there's ghosts of, and it really gets on my nerves because the royal family, through the media, do not represent the people of Britain. The royal family are now representing Muslim at a time when we actually really need to have a royal family to go round to various places. I know that William and Catherine have, well, they've both been ill. I mean, I don't know what's true and what's not, and the king. But you don't get any royalty going around, or I don't see them, probably because I don't watch the BBC, but they don't do anything anymore. And this is when we really need a royalty and somebody standing up for our own faith. But this is what I'm saying about October the 7th. There was so much rubbish on the BBC, and there still is. And, Netanyahu, what else could he do but to go to war with Hamas? What else could he do? They're only a small country, and yet they're surrounded by complete idiots and fools and people who are mental or demonic. That's how I see it, because they don't look after their own people. What I found out, I mean, I do watch YouTube, not quite as much as I used to do, but we did see this part news and stuff off the webcam from Hamas. And the thing is, what they don't tell you is Hamas use their own people. That's why they use the hospitals. That's why they use the mosques. That's why they use the schools, where they hide their weapons. I mean, it's not just like a water pistol, is it? These big weapons, bombs and guns and all sorts of things. And they even used to put them under their children's bed. And later on with the hostages, they also used hostages as human shields. And when I saw those hostages come out of being in those tunnels and they were so thin. I mean, as I heard, and I think is true, do victims actually hold hostages and starve them to death and leave them in the dark and torture them? Do victims really do that? No, I don't think so. I don't know about you, but I certainly don't. The whole last 2 years have been absolutely horrendous. Using hostages as pawns, and then when they come out, they have these big propaganda things. And those people were really ill. It's just terrible. I just can't believe. And, poor old, the guy, the family, the Beavis family, to put the woman in the wrong, was it the baby in the wrong coffin? Or the woman in the, I don't know which one it was offhand. But that was just even worse. I mean, I really sort of felt sorry for Mr. Beavis, and they taunted him, oh, well, you could get another wife, you could get some more children. And one hostage didn't even know his wife and children had been murdered. Those babies were throttled, and the wife. That must have been terrible. And how do you pray? I find it very difficult to know how to pray because there's a part of me that knows that we need to pray for their salvation. And I did pray for their salvation, and I prayed for the Gazan people. And I was really pleased because I heard that Yeshua, Jesus Christ, they had dreams and visions and visitations from Jesus, Yeshua. And hundreds came to Christ. And I know that members of Hamas have also come to Christ because when their eyes were opened to the barbaric behavior of his colleagues, he helped this Christian lady. And so what they did was come round and raped his wife in front of him. And he knew that was terrible. So he came to Christ. And I'm so pleased that people are coming to Christ. And I know that with IDF, they were going on walking into Gaza. And all of a sudden, this huge, great big dove came in front of them and they couldn't move anymore. Had they gone one footstep more, they'd have all been dead. If that's not God, I don't know what. um, the whole thing of October the 7th was terrible. And then, of course, we have the fact they had a Buddha in a supernova, which would not be pleasing to God. And you start to think things then as you get more and more information. But the goodness of it is that those people who had just started to practice Shabbat and keep those days purely holy and they didn't work and they began to pray and did the things that Jewish people do on Shabbat, he got saved from being a hostage. Another young lady who really kept her faith was very respected by Hamas because they even brought her a Jewish prayer book because she followed the festivals, she followed Shabbat, she loved God and she prayed and she helped other people. She was rescued. All these people who called upon the name of God were rescued, who acknowledged that God is Creator God. And these were the people who were rescued. I don't know whether all of them who were rescued had the same experience. But all these things really make you think. But I began to pray, Lord, lead Gazans to you, lead Hamas to you. And I'd go on the websites and put little comments that God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son to condemn the world, but to save them from sin. And when I began to get this feedback about people who gave their lives to Jesus, because I know that many, I've known terrorists myself in the Northern Ireland who are in the UVF and IRA. I've known many of those who came to Jesus. So I do know it happens, but the problem is when you're going through all this and you begin to process it, um, it's horrific. And I hope it's made people think as well. But for people who really do believe that Hamas and, the Palestine is not a country. Back in the day, I can't remember who it was, but it was a leader of the Romans, a Roman emperor, I can't think who it was, said that they called Judea Palestinia, not Palestine, but Palestinia, because they didn't want the Nazarenes to continue with their bringing people to Messiah. And so Constantine was another one who changed the Hebrew calendar. They all messed it up, which is why there's so many problems with theologies, who God is, who Yeshua is, and is it Jesus Christ? Is it Yeshua? But there was never any country called Palestine, never was and never is. They were a people who originally came from Crete. They were seafarers or whatever, but they were not Israelites. And in the Bible, let's have a little look because I can't remember where anything is. That's the problem. But God promised the land to Egypt. I'm just trying to find where it is. Abraham. This is promises to Abraham, and this is Genesis 12. And you're talking 3 or 4 thousand years ago, maybe a little bit more, because the Earth's just over 6,500 years if you go right back to Noah. Not Noah, Adam and Eve. Now the Lord had said to Abram, get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house, to a land that I will show you, and I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you, and in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. Amen. And then his grandson, Jacob, was named Israel. So I know that the land of Israel, right back thousands of years, Israel, the land that God had promised Abraham, is Israel. And people have lived there for thousands and thousands of years. Now, when you go back to Abraham, another thing that I found out and learned, which was very amazing, through watching the film about Abraham, is that Abraham was called Abram. And Abram means exalted father. And then when God told Abram that he was to have another son, Isaac, he called him Abraham, father of many nations. So we can see that I know that Abraham had Ishmael through Haggai because they didn't have the faith to really believe that Sarah, who was quite old or very old, would have a child. It's got to have a lot of faith. You know, people do have faith, I must admit, but Muslims talk about Abraham, but Abraham was Abram when he had Ishmael. And even was it Noah or Seth? One of them didn't want Ishmael to be the ruler of Abraham's people. He wanted Abraham, the father of many nations, to give the line to Isaac. And the thing is, I'm going to say this because I think it's important. Now, in May, when we went to Israel, I took with me some little dolly things my friend had knitted because I asked her to knit Yeshua and the disciples. And I gave them to Pastor Mazan, who runs a church in the old city. And he said, would you like to go and meet some Gazans? Well, I have got brain injury. But I'd really forgotten about October the 7th and how it made me feel at the time, as I described earlier. I said, yes, we'll go. I didn't know where we were going to, other than it would be the Mount of Olives. I didn't know who was coming with us, other than he was a Muslim convert to Christianity. I didn't know who was going to take us there, where we were going. I didn't know the person we were going with. And we got 50 boxes of chocolates from a Palestinian store. And I did spend about 500 quid on it. I mean, you don't know at the time because you just get the money out your bank, but you don't realise how much money it is. But it turned out to be 2,000 shekels. Well, that man was just absolutely gobsmacked. He was shocked, gobsmacked. But God wanted to bless him with the money because he was just in a shop and the local people buy every day, but it might not sustain his business and his business might have been in collapse. But all I know was that we bought 50 boxes of chocolates, 50 holding crosses in St. George's little jewel. Well, it was more like God icons and Marys and crosses and those kind of thing. Across the road from St. George's Cathedral, where we were staying in the guest house. And I'd save 50 soaps because I just collect soaps every day because we've got our own. So I just put them in a bag. And sometimes I might give them to friends because they're not horrible. They're really quite nice spa little bottles of soap and conditioner. And people who I know might have not a lot of money. And I enjoy giving people things. So anyway, I said, God, I don't know what we're going to do because the guy who was coming with us didn't speak English. We were going to speak to Gazans and who was going to be the interpreter. And I prayed about it. We met Charlie the following day when we went somewhere, who was the same. He was a Muslim convert to Christianity. So anyway, Joseph arrived. It wasn't his real name, but he called himself Joseph. And we prayed in the reception of St. George's guest house. And Charlie arrived, who spoke English, and off we went. I didn't know whether it was going to be a hospital or what. I can't. It looked a bit like a house in sandbanks because it was partly glass, and the shape of it. I can't really explain it, but anyway, you went in and all these gardens with it, and you could see, they were half expecting me to start preaching the gospel. You could just tell in the face, but I said, look, and I didn't know how to explain anything. I just said, look, you're Muslims, I'm a Christian, but, I've come to share you the love of Jesus or just God's love. And we gave them the chocolates and they were completely over the moon. Taxi driver wasn't feeling very good because, if you're a Muslim and you turn to Christianity, you can be murdered by your family. And we had to go after a while because Charlie, he wanted to go and I couldn't stop there. I couldn't speak the language and it was very difficult, but we did the best with the situation we're in. But I just know that they were blessed because Gazan people actually not very well liked by anybody. And just to go there and give them chocolates and holding cross. And I know they were Christians, but it was what was actually going on there that changed the atmosphere. It wasn't, oh, you're Muslim, give your life to Jesus, or you killed all those Israelis. I just said, I'm a Christian, you're Muslim, and here's some gifts. And they really liked it. And I think that was a big lesson for me because we have to get away from hatred. Sometimes the first month or two or a while, we don't know how to deal with the anger or what happened. But at the end of the day, we must love our enemies and pray for those who hate us. And a lot of the time, they're in fear as much as we are. Because when we went to Israel, and we went to Jerusalem, and we were on the can't think of the name of it again, the Nablus Road, and all that is generally Arabic. Not all Arabs are Muslim, by the way. Some of them are quite high um, Roman Catholics. But they looked at us, and I was thinking, what do we do? I said, hello, how are you? Are you okay? And they were so relieved and pleased because they thought I might go up and say, you killed all those Jews. What did you do with those? And actually, that's a wrong way. That's a completely wrong way. They know what happened. They know how people feel. They know actually how terrible it was. But there's no good me going up to them and saying, yeah, just by sharing chocolates, holding crosses and shampoo, and it was very expensive at me because it did come at a cost, but I cannot thank the Lord enough for doing that for me because we have to yes, at the time when these things happen, it's terrible. And I imagine the people who are in Manchester would feel the same. But we have to stop hating and start loving because if we don't start loving and stop hating, it just continues. And Hamas, people want a ceasefire, but they keep pushing it, don't they? Sending off rockets. Even now, today, they sent off a rocket. But what good's that? That's not. You see, the thing is, they want death. These terrorists want death. They love death. They don't like life. They want to die. But Yeshua came to bring life. He died on a cross because he bore our sin. He died on a cross. His blood was shed. His body was broken because he loves you and values your life. And I think that's a very powerful message. And God often does this to me. I get so cross. But then I'm saying, Lord, I don't know what to do. And then the next day he shows me a different message. I struggle with who gets ordained sometimes because I just believe people that are born again should be ordained. And I get very, very upset inside when people aren't, who you can never really know, but you know more or less that they aren't believers, they haven't been born again. And I get really upset. And this happened at the weekend and I ended up with a nosebleed. I was stressed. But what a silly thing to do, really, that. I was wasted my time because, you know, a lot of these people aren't really what you assume they are. A lot of people were just normal people, normal lives, struggling. And have to learn to love people, not to hate them. If we don't love people and we hate people, it's just going to continue. And I'm glad that this country has raised its head because we don't want a lot of Muslim migrants who are getting everything our own people don't. Many homeless people I know in Poole, one of them, I was told was in a car park, fast asleep in a bag. People came from the pub and kicked him to death. And that's the thing. That poor man has got a story of why he's homeless. And if those people hadn't been drunk, had knew him, I very much doubt they would have kicked him to death. But that story about going to see the Garsons was the biggest wake-up call of my life. We can't hate. And the last thing, I've got to go because I'm going on too much, but when I was in Israel, I looked at Solu, who are a fantastic worship group, and they have their own prayer house, how 24/7 house of prayer. And oh, what's he called? Shiloh or I don't know how you pronounce it, but I say Shiloh Ben Hod. He said the same thing because he works with Arabs and believers. He's a Messianic Jew. And on that day, when they saw what had happened on the news, they cried for 2 days, him and his wife. And he was so cross, he couldn't even speak to his Arab friends. Some of them were Muslim, become Christian. Some Arabs were Catholics. And he was so mad he couldn't even speak to them. He couldn't sound like I did. Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar. He hated that word. And he did. And obviously, like me, he was praying, Lord, I can't cope with this. I don't like this. And rah, 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 rah. But the story was one of his Arab friends, I think they came from Gaza, funny enough, and they were there when they had a conference just before the 7th of October. And he was told by God that there was going to be um, this terrible thing, and to remember the conference they just had where they're all in unity, singing and praying. They all might have a few differences in theology, but in that time of worship, they were in unity. And said that's God said that's how it's got to be after the time because it would be difficult for people to cope with. And so from that time, they repented and now they're working together more and more with Arabs, obviously people who might not be Jewish, but they believe in Yeshua HaMashiach, the Messiah. They all have one common accord, and that's Yeshua. And there was a song called It Begins Here, or It Begins. And every time I see that song, I feel elated because this is how God wants one bride, not two, three, four, and five, but God wants one bride. The people who love Yeshua, the people he's going to be with for eternity. And I just thought, yes, I understood exactly where he was coming from, and I understand exactly how he felt. And that testimony really helped me. Because I was thinking, is Hamas going to kill us? Is it just a setup for Hamas to get us as hostages? But no, that was the enemy trying not to do that because it wasn't. God was behind it right from when I bought the things that the little knitted men, Jesus and his disciples. Right then, he already planned it all out. So yes, this was the biggest thing that you could imagine. So anyway, October the 7th, it can lead on to other things. We've got all sorts of feelings, all sorts of issues, but we have to learn to forgive and we have to learn to love your enemies. And that's the only way, because if you hate, you hate, you hate. And if you want to kill, 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 it's not going to get anybody anywhere. You've got to love them and forgive them. Because if Jesus Christ was crucified on a cross and bore your sin so that you didn't have to have any more Yom Kippurs or hit yourself with a metal object if you're Muslim, because Jesus paid it all. And that's, for me, God taught me a huge lesson. But we must never forget October the 7th, never forget the times when Jewish people were murdered. But we also must remember the persecuted church because we've forgotten about the 52,000 Nigerians who died for their faith. And my question is, would you die for your faith?